So the last video of the day is going to be about the Truman Doctrine, Marshall Plan and Berlin Blockade. Again, this is part of the Edexcel History A specification with the A star to G qualification. So, what was the Truman Doctrine? Doctrine means belief. I always remember it as belief. So this is what Harry Truman believed. His concerns were that Europe was devastated after the war, and in many countries people had no money and no jobs, so no form of income whatsoever. Communism was attractive to people. It really was, because like I said in one of my previous videos, people really are stronger when they are working together for the same goal, and communism always meant that people had enough. But that doesn't mean that people particularly had good lives. Many in Eastern Europe had been liberated from Nazi rule by the USSR, so that kind of gave certain countries more like a I don't know how to describe it, kind of a one-up for the USSR, because they did save them from the Nazi rule. Countries like Romania, Poland and Bulgaria had already had communist governments forced on them. They didn't have a choice, but they were already communist. Some governments, like in Greece and Turkey for example, were poor, and this meant that communism again was attractive to people because of its economic status. And Truman believed that if Greece and Turkey became communist, other countries would too. And this was part of the domino theory, that if one country fell to communism, other countries would too. So, the official part of the Truman Doctrine. Truman stated that countries must choose between communism and capitalism. There's no happy medium. And communism was bad because people could not be free, people couldn't own their own businesses, and vice versa. And they couldn't choose their own jobs, and they couldn't criticise anything. They had a lot of human rights removed. The USA must try to contain communism. So this is where the containment theory comes in, where they try to do everything in their power to stop communism leaving its sphere of influence that was given and agreed to in the conferences, and that the USA should provide money and troops if necessary to combat communist takeovers. So basically, we can kind of see they're kind of desperate. They are willing to do anything to keep communism at bay. So, the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was formed after the Truman Doctrine was announced, as it fixed a lot of the contents of the Truman Doctrine. So, as part of the Truman Doctrine, the Marshall Plan was introduced. So, $13 billion from the USA was set aside to rebuild Europe as part of the Marshall Plan. That's a really good stat, and it will really help you in your exam. Communism appealed to people with nothing to lose. People that just wanted to try things new and weren't really getting by in life, so they just had nothing to lose whatsoever. So the Marshall Plan was introduced with the hope that it could stop communism by giving people a stake in capitalism. Countries must trade with the USA to be eligible to be accepted into the Marshall Plan and get money. As we saw in the last video about the Comic-Con and Cominform, they basically do the same thing. So you might be able to see now the links between the USA and the USSR. Basically, the USA comes up with the ideas, and then the USSR copy them. And the USSR claimed that they saw the Marshall Plan as an attack on them. So the Berlin Blockade was introduced because the USSR felt that the USA was threatening them by introducing the Marshall Plan. So the Berlin Blockade consisted of blocks that the USSR made to modes of transport so that the US could not deliver goods to their quarter of Berlin. So they blocked roads, they blocked railways, you name it, they blocked it. So, Bisonia and Western Germany. So, the USA wanted a united capitalist Germany, but they knew that wasn't going to happen because the Soviet Union had a certain part of Germany, and that was agreed in the conferences, so it couldn't go beyond that, but it was trying to do its best. Also, the USSR and the Soviet Union are the same thing. So it made sense for the UK and the US to join their zones together. So this new area was called Bisonia, and it was featured in the Marshall Plan. This was not popular with the USSR because Stalin thought Bisonia went against the Potsdam agreements, which it didn't. But I can see where he's coming from, but it's nothing to get too excited about. Eastern Germany and the Berlin Blockade. So, the USSR had over 1.5 million troops in its zone, and the West was kind of different because it sent most of their troops home. Eastern Germany grew almost all the food that Western Germany ate, so that's a one-up for the Soviet Union on the US. So they had most of the food, which is kind of quite funny thinking about it now. So the USSR blocked off all supplies into Berlin to show that it had power. No other reason really, apart from that the USSR wanted Germany to be weak so that it could never attack again. Some of the blockade also consisted of blocking off food supplies for West Germany as they grew all the food. So the Berlin airlift was introduced. West Berlin couldn't last for many days without supplies, and it really did look like for a while that the Western powers were going to have to retreat. And this was exactly what the USSR wanted, because unlike the USA, they didn't want a united Germany that was capitalist. They wanted a united Germany that was communist. I wonder why. So if they had to retreat, that would undermine the USA, and as we know, the USA do not like to be undermined. So they flew thousands of tons of supplies into Berlin, hence why it's called the airlift, because they figured out that there was a landing strip in West Berlin that they could use to fly in supplies. So that's what they did. So what were the effects of the Berlin blockade? On West Germany, the Berlin airlift made the USA look peaceful and generous. So the Berlin blockade was a massive backfire on East Germany because it completely went against everything that it had set out to do. As the blockade also made East Germany look aggressive. So officially, West Germany was called the FRG. I'm not sure what that stands for. Somebody could Google it and tell me what it means in the comments. But that was formed in September 1949, and it was the US's side. Then in October of 1949, East Germany was officially formed as the GDR. Not sure what that means, and it was run by the Soviets. Again, in 1949, the Western European countries and the USA formed NATO to try and combat the USSR if something went wrong. And again, we have a prime example of the USSR copying the Western powers, because in 1955, the USSR formed the Warsaw Pact to counter the military threat from NATO, and that was pretty much the same thing as NATO, but the USSR's version, and a complete copy of NATO, basically. So yeah, that's all I have to cover on here. So that was Truman Doctrine, Marshall Plan, and the Berlin Blockade for the History A Edexcel specification. If you have any questions, please do comment down below and I will endeavour to answer them. Thank you.